Thank you, everyone. So today I'm going to present you with a special version, new distribution of Jenkins, so Jenkins Essentials. So who I am a Jenkins contributor. I've been working on Jenkins for a few years. Before it was called a bit differently, like around 2010. So about Jenkins contribution. So next week, just what I'm thinking about that, we are organizing a hackathon, an online hackathon. So if you want to participate and get involved in open source in general, to try and make it work on Java 10 and Java 10, I think. So because for now, don't try it; it will just probably blow up. On another thing, we are hiring, and partly on the things that I'm going to discuss today. So just reach out to me afterwards if you're interested. And so let's get started. So in last Jenkins World 2017, so it was September last year, Kohsuke Kawaguchi was introducing the day of the Contributor Summit, and was trying to recap the strengths and weaknesses of Jenkins. So in the end, indeed, trying to say, okay, how could we do that? It really becoming simpler and simpler to get started with Jenkins in a few minutes or a few seconds, even for newcomers, because indeed today you may know that it might be a bit hard to get up and running in a correct way with Jenkins, because, for instance, the things like running no workload on the master, which is pretty often done by many people, which is not the thing to do, because if you want to scale, at some point it's going to probably to blow up your master. So many things like these are actually hard to learn and to set up, from the ground up. So is this really easy to do that? And so it's started up thinking about how we could do that. And so some thinking about that said initially that maybe having some kind of wizard, evolved wizard, like already the Jenkins 2 introduced, was this really revolutionary or something we wanted to add? And along the way, we started to find the idea better and better and find things to implement. And so the first thing we wanted to try and implement was to try and say, okay, how could we do that users are going to be able to start Jenkins and that it would kind of auto-configure depending on the environment it's running in. So for instance, if you're starting up a Jenkins server instance in the AWS marketplace or in the Azure marketplace, then it should auto-configure to run agents in a transient manner, temporary manner, in the cloud, in the same account you just provisioned things in, so that you right away, just after you got started, have things be able to run in a correct way, secured way, and not running, for instance, as I said before, things on the master node, right? Any question before I move on? Seems not. So said like this, it's already a good thing, but then one of the biggest cruxes of our work, today, that it's hard to keep things updated. So we then started thinking, well, how, even more in Jenkins, where that there are a lot of people coming in. There are a lot of weekly releases or LTS releases every month, and plugins are released basically every day. So how make it this, less of a pain? Like today, people have to upgrade like every day or something to have things constantly up to date, because we all know that if you don't upgrade regularly, then basically at some point it's going to be a very, very big update, and either it's going to be a giant pain, or you're going to suffer a lot, or you just will cancel the update. So how to make that also kind of a pleasure to run without not having to care too much about that thing. So we ended up thinking, okay, we are going to provide something that is going to auto-update everything, Jenkins, the plugins, so that the users don't have anything to do, so that it works. So, okay, now I'm doing the product management work, right? So I have a product vision. It's easy to just use the hands to say things, but how to do that for real? So what we wanted to keep the people who knows basically nothing are happy, right? So we ended up using kind of a usual feature, I would say, or way of doing things today, which is going to be, so locally, using some form of automated health check, which means basically Jenkins is going to be installed and regularly is going to be updated, right? And once it's going to be updated, it's going to be then checked, and if it's not okay, then it's going to be rolling back to the previous version. Be it that it means that we need to roll back the war. So the war, for people maybe not that aware, is the core of Jenkins, the web app, or be it that we need to roll back a given plugin that was constituting the last update that we just applied. So how do we then, so that's the local way of doing things right and making sure it works in the long term, and just not like the first time with a wow effect and then after one day of work it just screws up everything. We are going to use the fact that the instances around the world are going to be connected. That means that they are going to report in an anonymous manner the fact if they are working, right? That means like we are going to use many ways like canary testing, for instance. So the fact that we are going to deploy, let's say, the new version first on a subset of instances in a special first channel like the canary channel, and then maybe the beta channel, and then maybe the general channel, like you already probably many people here are now getting used to, for instance with Chrome, with Firefox, which are using a specific channel and to get updates in a kind of an automated fashion. And how then, from a global perspective, we are going to assess the quality and the health level of a given update level. This is how we call a given upgrade. But then it's kind of simple. Let's say just we are going to trigger an upgrade. And then after the upgrade has completed, then the instance is going to report back, okay, I'm alive. Or maybe no, we won't ever heard back again, so we will be able to say, okay, we know that we instructed an update on some given instance around the world somewhere, and so we knew that out of, let's say, 100 of instances, let's say 99 got back to us and said, well, I'm alive, seems like the upgrade went fine, or maybe like 1% or maybe 20% said only went back, and so we are able to assess if some update level seems to be running fine out there, and if we should, for instance, deploy it globally. I mean, like the basics of canary testing. If you never heard about that, that's how it works for companies like Netflix and so on, and many others, to be able to just assess the quality and the health level of a given new release. And that way, we're going to be able to make sure not a lot of users, our users, stay happy and things keep working durably. So overall, if I recap, there's kind of a fourth aspect of what I've just described, is the obvious path. So what I've just explained is that indeed we want to make it clear and simple for users, and especially for newcomers, obviously, but also for people who don't want to operate their instance anymore for various reasons. So we want to make it opinionated and clear out obstacles. So what does that mean? Does it mean? That means that, for instance, we are going to disable features that are not used by a lot of people, or we know that are creating more pain than it's providing any value. Like so we, for instance, know that we already most likely will disable by default freestyle jobs. We already disabled the executors on the master. So when you're starting an essential instance, this has zero way to execute things on the master. So maybe if you've never seen a talk about that or explanation about that, if you wonder why nobody should run any workload on the master, is because it's going to, you know, impact your CPU, impact your RAM on the node that is supposed to handle the load of your cluster. So it's going to be looking fine when you're starting up, but over time, when you're running like we were before in my previous position or in many places, thousands of or hundreds of thousands of jobs and like dozens of hours a day of build, then possibly at regular time, people will say, I don't understand, the UI of Jenkins is not answering. Well, that's normal because everything is running on the master and nothing is able to serve any request anymore. So that's one of the reasons also. So that's just the performance aspect. And there's another aspect that is even possibly more important, that if you allow people to run on the master, then they can just basically do rm-rf or not even doing that on purpose, to wipe out everything on the master's file system. So, and it's already happened to us. So I can tell you, don't do that. So recapping, so we have four aspects of what I've just described. We want to make things behave automatically and auto-configure depending on the environment it's running in. For instance, for this, if you run in AWS, recently we released, and the Jenkins project released what's called the external software artifacts storage, which means that basically now, contrary to some people may already know, the artifacts, the stashes for pipeline, the archival of things are going to be doable, and there's already a plugin for that, which is able to store those in S3 for AWS. So it scales way better. Because, for instance, if you have thousands of jobs or dozens of thousands of jobs, like I see regularly among our customers, then it's going to you'll be able to scale out better. So that we described pretty extensively. The fact that we want to use the telemetry to be able to assess the health level overall and be able to, for instance, when I'm going to upgrade someone from something to some other version, I'm going to be able to say, okay, no, I don't want to make them go through that update level because I know it's broken. And so overall, that fourth one is about making things clear for everyone. Now we're digging, and I'm going to show you more and more in detail how it works, and we'll have a demo in some time. That project is findable at that URL, and everything is being done in the open. So we are following the 4 opens of the OpenStack project, if you know about that. We're kind of inspiring from that. So everything is open. The source, the design, which means like basically we have specifications, which kind of unfortunately are called JEPs, which means Jenkins Enhancement Proposal. If you know already the JDK Enhancement Proposal or something like that, which got actually inspired from the Python enhancement proposals in the Python community and those open way of designing and gathering feedback for designing things. We are developing everything, and so obviously that's one of the reasons I'm here for today. We have an open community and discuss everything in the open. So now more concretely, so how does all these things work? Because this already exists. This is not finished. This is not yet available for final users, but it's already working and it's being actively developed. So we have, as you may have started to understand, a backend which the instances are going to connect to, which is going to be likely evergreen.jenkins.io. So evergreen, if you don't know that meaning, if you're not English, it's the term used for trees that never lose their leaves. And it's been used and introduced by Chrome and so on in the past. So we have a client running in the environment of the instance, which for our example and most of the time is going to be a Docker container, a Docker image. This one is going to be the one connecting to the backend and going to register and then to authenticate. Why do we need to register and authenticate? You may think, or you may wonder. It's kind of obvious actually when you think about, for instance, things that are going to be pushed from this to the backend. We want to be able to, let's say, push back some attacks or be able to find logs coming from a given instance afterwards and not just take everything, and then if someone pushed something wrong or something, we cannot, you know, filter or select a few things depending on where it comes from. So then it's going to receive a list of things to do, and basically it's going to be a list of a list of plugins, and possibly a list of a version of the client, by the way, because we want to make everything updatable automatically, even the client itself. So then it's going to download things, install, and trigger a restart of Jenkins. And it's going to be that way every time. And it's going actually, well, I described just after, but basically going to make it rollbackable. So meaning that we are going to use Git, and there's a JEP for that to explain how we are going to do that, to basically Git commit and store the situation before and the situation after, to be able to get back to some, because as you may not know, or you may know, Jenkins is currently very heavily XML config files based. So we want to be able to roll back some part of this to be able to not have issues, because when you upgrade, for instance, a given plugin, it could introduce something that are not backward compatible. Then it means that if you go back to a previous version of a given plugin, then the instance could just blow up because the plugin doesn't understand anything anymore. So how does it work for an update? It's very similar, actually, and I kind of already hinted some things about that. So let's say you are in the update level 1 because you disconnected your instance for whatever reason, a network issue or something, even if you should be staying connected. Then we're going to push you through the different update levels, but the one that we know are tainted. The update levels that we know have been creating issues on instances running in the fleet around the world, right? So we are going to download basically the diff, which means, like, for instance, an update level could be just a single plugin update, or just the war, or maybe a big one, even if obviously for obvious reasons, we probably will try to make things go, you know, in a continuous delivery manner, so keep things easy and small, so that you reduce the chunk size, and so per the continuous delivery, I mean, basics, reducing the chunk size, reducing the risk associated to a given update, right? Then it's going to just do something similar, so checkpointing it and installing and rolling back if needs be. So, did I forget? No, that's right. So I'm going to now show you a demonstration of how it works and the current state of that thing. So, so let's get back to here just quickly to explain. So I'm going to trigger, so the update is not done. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to start something. And for our case, we have already implemented the Docker Cloud Auto Configuration flavor, I would say. So it's going to start. The client is going to register, authenticate, and connect to the backend, receive an update, trigger the right downloads, and trigger the right restart for Jenkins. And then things I will show you that actually the logs are going to be sent back to the backend. So how does it work? I'm going to just explain quickly. So some things here. You see this is just typical Docker run. So in that flavor, in the local way where you would like to just use a local big server to run your workload and separate things using Docker container with memory, limited memory, for instance. So it would not be probably the recommended situation, but it's the easiest way to set up while still keeping some form of isolation between your agents and the master, right? So here, for that case, I'm mounting the Docker socket. Then I'm overriding this because in the future, the backend will exist. For now, it's not deployed yet. The service exists, the services exist, but they are running by hand, but they are going to be deployed in the next few days because I know that the team, the the person working on that part is deploying that in the next few hours or days. So I just deployed that on something similar to the future with just the end different. But basically that thing you will have to specify in the future, right? Then the port binding as usual, and the rest you possibly don't know, but you don't want to care about that if you don't know what that means. It's just Docker things. And so I'm going to start that. And so it's going to be a bit fast, but you're going to see what I've just explained. So it's starting. So I'm going to scroll down slowly, more slowly that is putting logs. So you see that the client is starting. Whoop. The client is starting up. It's configuring to use the right endpoint, registering, sorry. It's creating a registration, so it means that in the backend we know which instances exist, and we then are able to link back those instances to do the authentications, which means that we have UIDs and know, if a given registered instance, we are able to say, okay, it connected last time like 5 minutes ago, or never again after 2 months ago or something, to be able to assess the number of instances in the fleet and be able to deploy new versions and so on, depending on the channel it is running in. So you see here something like, okay, after the authentication, it saved its UID, which is going to reuse then for every exchanges, as a kind of obvious maybe. Then we are having some things like periodic tasks that are running, like, okay, every 5 minutes or every hour, say, okay, I'm still alive, so that we can constantly assess the health of a given instance. Because for instance, if it's okay just after a restart, but it blows up after 5 minutes, well, we still want to know, right? Then we set up an error logging, which I'm going to describe a bit more afterwards. And then it's not really nicely displayed, but basically it's receiving the update. It's more a technical log for now. But you see here what is received. And so here it's starting to fetch things. So you see it's starting to download, where is it? The war, the given plugins described in the manifest that we just received here. Then fetching, and you're going to see later on. So, okay, complete. Then everything is complete. We restart Jenkins. We save the manifest because we know it worked. We are going to post back. It's not written here, but basically, if it's not done here, maybe it's not done yet, but it will be done soon because we are wrapping up everything at the same time at those days. Posting the fact that we did download correctly, we did start correctly, trying to checkpoint different steps so that we know where we were able to go up to. And so it's starting, so it's a usual, so that part is more usual if you're used to it, the Jenkins logs. And there's a special stack trace, you don't want to worry. Please ignore it, as it's written. It's actually kind of a smoke test exception. In the beginning, when I did that, it was just to test things, and I'm starting to think I'm going to keep that because it's interesting to be able to also kind of have a smoke testing to be able that the error logging does work when we restart Jenkins. And I'm going to show you afterwards where it's going. So it's starting, the usual logs. So here you see some logs that are actually using what's called the configuration as code plugin. I won't dive into detail about that today, but it's very, very important initiative in Jenkins those days to be able to configure as code your Jenkins instance. We are pushing logs, blah, 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 and so we are reaching the end of the usual logs of Jenkins. So once I'm here, I'm going to then open a Jenkins instance and use that thing as usual. So this is, if you never saw Jenkins, this is one of the things that changed in Jenkins 2 that is basically making it secure out of the box. There was something similar in JBoss AS some years ago where basically you would have to have access to the disk of the app server to be able to reach out to the right file that would be making things not admin by default, right? That when you were, like 10 years ago starting an instance, it would be rightly available on the internet, and everybody would, there would be script kiddie scanning internet to attack your instance just after you started it. So right now, Jenkins, since 2 years or 3 years ago now is configured to be secured out of the box. You have to go in the logs or on the file system of Jenkins to access that dynamically generated password for the admin, basically. Well, it's in French, but it's written unblock Jenkins. So now it's going to show me the suggested plugins wizard, which I'm going to skip. Obviously, that's one of the things that probably will change as we go. For now, we'll not reach that point yet, but we are going to make it more obvious, possibly not proposing the same way the plugins, because some plugins, and as you started to understood, many plugins are already installed by default by the Evergreen client. So I'm going to just skip it and start using it. So right away after I just started it, if I show you, as I was saying, the master node, you're going to see that there's no executor by default. So that means that as it is, if I don't do anything special, I can't run anything. If I create a job, it's not going to run. It's going to be stuck in the queue. So I'm going to still create a pipeline job. And going to use something like just an hello world to see if I can provision something. Echo hello EclipseCon France, and then save and launch a build. So if as we say demo gods are with me, we should see something happening. So if I look here, I should see something like that happening. Yep, I'm going to just zoom a bit. And so you see that actually a dynamically provisioned instance of agent is being provisioned and has been provisioned, and because the job already run. And you see that it's actually run in that container that just was then thrown away. And you can see here, if I go back here, you see that it was trying to pulling the right image that has automatically been configured. If I show you the master configuration, actually, you see that here, because of the fact I specified the Docker socket, it's automatically configured the Docker cloud with the right settings to be able to use it right away after I just started. Okay? So everything is working out of the box for what we wanted to do. And so if I wrap up the demo, then now I'm going to show you, I'm connected here. Oh. I don't know, it was frozen, so let's try to reconnect. I'm connecting to the backend, right? So I'm going to show you the backend and show you what happens there. So I'm opening the node, and I'm going to tail the error login JSON, which is now a raw file on the server side, exposed by an API, which is going to evolve over time, but right now it's more this way. So, and if I go here, for instance, if I go here and trigger some builds, we know that there's currently a bug in the Docker plugin that is going to generate those kinds of ugly stack traces on a mostly random manner, but pretty often. So you see those here. And if I go there, you see that those logs are actually sent automatically. They are actually serialized on the disk because they are detected by the plugin that's running in Jenkins that got automatically installed, serialized on the disk, detected by the client, sent to the backend, and the backend serializes it on the disk of the server, which obviously in the future is going to be something pretty different, possibly still on the disk, but more likely sent by Fluentd or something to some given Elasticsearch instance or something like this, or Azure Log Analytics, for instance. Okay? Is there any question before I move on? Anyway, we'll get back to it. So what are the upcoming challenges of that project? Because you see that it's already working, but not everything is already done. So the instructed upgrade, for now, we have the initial startup, but the fact that we are going to receive an upgrade is almost done, but not done yet. So the fact that we have the full iteration loop that we are going to be start things, then make it upgraded in a regular manner, so that we can start to dogfood it ourselves first, as soon as possible. The metrics telemetry, because as you just saw, the error telemetry is already done, but the metrics telemetry, it means like, storing the number of pipelines, the number of, let's say, steps or whatever metrics, which is interesting to be able to accelerate for developers, because developers are going to have, we are going to reduce the feedback loop because users are going to be deployed the latest version of everything, and developers, so we'll have a very, very quick feedback, like let's say the next hour or the next 2 hours after they just released, they are going to be starting receiving feedback from the users around the world, which is really, really interesting to accelerate, kind of the basics also, another foundation of continuous delivery, right? And so, interestingly, have a bit more than 0 users. So, summarizing, we want to provide a Jenkins instance, very, very easy to use, on-premise, obviously, kind of on-premise or in your private cloud account, public cloud account, I mean. Probably, possibly not for you. If you're already a Jenkins expert, you're not interested, or maybe you are. I know some people who are really world-renowned experts who are interested. There is some instance that they can just run automatically, be automatically upgraded, while they can concentrate on other things like developing Jenkins itself, for instance, and not fixing operating it. And so at that stage of the project, obviously, kind of, feedback is really, really, really welcome. So if you're interested to participate, because it's a purely open source project, as I explained, here is how you get started. It's really easy. And so it should work everywhere, because we have obviously continuous delivery pipeline for this. More in continuous integration for now, but and that's it for what I wanted to explain. So thank you. Any question?
Yes, this one. And there is automatic telemetry and so on. Is there any chunk of use or anything saying what kind of data is returned, how it is, who can use it?
Yeah, so the question is, if I understand correctly, is there some explanation in terms of use about which data is going to be used? And so if I understand, something related to the GDPR, basically. We discussed that recently. We are going to handle it. It's not done yet because we have 0 user, but we are going to do that very soon. Basically, yes, for kind of answering still a bit more than just your question. Things are all anonymous, basically. We don't, for instance, for people who may be wondering about that, the logs of Jenkins are not the logs of the builds. So they are pretty different beasts. So we don't, for now, at least, and we don't plan to do it very soon, anytime soon, the build logs are not sent to the backend. Only the Jenkins logs, which are basically like 99% of the time, if not 100% of time, logs of plugins that are failing. So if a plugin is screwing up and putting passwords in clear text, which normally never happens, but shit happens, then yes, it could be sent to backend. But the backend is accessible by only a subset of people, very, very, very limited, and we don't plan to open it to everywhere in the future anyway. So, but we will clarify that point obviously in the future. Any other question? Seems not. Thank you, everyone.